All right, 1FC 157 is a wrap. So let's talk about it. Let's have a chat. What a card it was. I mean, I enjoyed it top to bottom. There was great MMA. There was great grappling. Like the debut of the Rotolo brothers was fantastic. I think I might have to do a video just on them. Some of the stuff they were doing was just phenomenal. It was new age. Never seen it before. But of course, what we all care about is the 1FC Muay Thai Grand Prix. And that's what we previewed earlier in the week, and that's what we're here to talk about now. So let's go over what happened. We'll start with the Goncalves fight, just because there's not too much to talk about on this one. Obviously, Haggerty out due to illness, which super unfortunate. I was really looking forward to that fight. I think Haggerty was a favorite alongside Rodtang, and that would have been ultimately the sickest final if we could have got Rodtang Haggerty 3, but these things happen. So he's out, and in steps Josue Cruz. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And poor guy didn't last too long. I don't know too much about him because it was so last minute, but he looked good in the initial exchange, and I was curious to see how this turned out, because I think he was preparing for a different fight, because they have alternate fights on the card for this exact reason. So they had one earlier in the night. I forget the name of the two men, but there was one guy from Canada fighting against, yeah, so Dennis Purich against Shirzad Kabutov. That was an alternate fight, right? So I think Cruz was scheduled for one of these alternate fights, but since Haggerty was out, he stepped in against Goncalves. And yeah, it was very short-lived. Only about a minute or two, I believe. Cruz looked okay in the first exchange, like I said, and then Goncalves just goes forward, hits him with a body shot, and we're done. That was basically the fight. So I didn't get to learn much about Cruz in that fight. I didn't get to see Goncalves tested or see if he would do that weird move we talked about earlier in the week where he just drops down to his knees basically when people throw bombs at him. Yeah, we didn't really get to test any of our hypotheses with that fight, unfortunately, but that's the game. Even high-level athletes get sick and have health concerns and have to not show up to work some days, so is what it is. Hope Haggerty's better soon, and can't wait to see him fight. He's one of my favorite fighters. I think he's a fan favorite in general, so wishing him the best. Let's go through the other ones. So, I mean, all the fights from this Grand Prix were, with the exception of the Goncalves fight, because it was just a short, quick finish, they were all amazing to watch. Savvas Michael versus Lasiri. Great performance from Savvas Michael. Stayed composed, looked so calm the whole time. Picked him apart from the outside, keeping him at kicking range, just in total control for 3 rounds. And Lasiri is out there throwing the kitchen sink behind every shot, winding up like he's trying to take the guy's head off or knock it into the third row. And because of that, it's just so blatantly telegraphed. So Michael's just slipping out of the way. Smooth as butter, returning fire. Lasiri had nothing for him. That was basically the story of that fight. 3 rounds to none for Savvas Michael, and he moves on to the semifinal. Excited to see his next fight. Superlek versus Naito. Similar kind of story, but just reverse, where the pressure and power of Superlek was just too much for Naito, and he couldn't get out of the way. Like, I think he has his nose probably broken early on into the fight, so he's breathing out of his mouth. And they call Superlek the kicking machine for a reason. I mean, man, every time he throws and you hear it hit Naito, like like I felt it in my leg watching him fight, you know? And because of that, Naito he couldn't get Superlek's respect. He's just on his back foot the whole time and basically just took a beating for 3 rounds. So those 2 fights, which were the first 2 of the night in terms of the Muay Thai Grand Prix, very one-sided, 3 rounds to none. Then we made our way, like we just talked about, to the Goncalves fight, over in a minute. And now we're going to spend most of the time basically just praising Rodtang, because what a performance. You know, I didn't think Rodtang can get any more dangerous or any more lethal, but I swear there's like a cheat code in combat sports when you dye your hair blonde. Like we see Oliveira in the UFC destroying everyone since he dyed his hair blonde. Blonde Brunson was on a roll for a while until he ran into Cannonier. There's something about it. I think if I ever find myself doing Muay Thai or anything, I'm going to dye my hair blonde before I go in because it seems like a cheat code. And I mean, as if Rodtang needed that, right? Already the most dangerous Muay Thai fighter, I think, in the current era, at least, for sure. And what was crazy about it, too, is he didn't take any unnecessary shots. Like, he still did the Rodtang where he just walks you down and throws bombs, but he was more evasive than I think we've ever seen him, which was crazy. So even though Jacob Smith has power in his hands, he's in the 4-ounce gloves for the first time, he couldn't really touch Rodtang. He didn't get too much off. Anything he did get off, it wasn't damaging. It was nothing Rodtang hadn't seen. And then what Rodtang would give him back was just far more damaging. And what I thought was interesting is Rodtang said that evasiveness is something he picked up when he was training MMA for the DJ fight, which is pretty cool. And then he said, this is what it looked like when I apply what I learned to Muay Thai, which is sick. He's even better. And what's funny is that everybody in this tournament, with the exception of Taiki Naito, all the contenders were asked the question, if it's not you, who do you think wins this tournament? And they all picked Superlek, except Naito picked Rodtang. And I'd be willing to bet that they changed their answer after that performance. Not that Superlek can't win. I think the final now, given that Haggerty's out, could be Superlek and Rodtang. But Blonde Rodtang is on another level. And he's showing improvement, which is crazy, not just in that evasiveness, but like he did the most of his damage in the elbow range this time, which is like, it's not like he never threw elbows, but the Rodtang we know, he has the big kicks, but he really does his damage with the hands and just like with those liver shots and just loading up and try to put his fist right through your face, it seems, you know? Chael Sonnen has a great line when he talks about people like Rodtang who have such bad intentions when they throw at you. Say he has such bad intentions, he'll punch you in the face and hope it hurts your leg. And that's what I see when Rodtang is throwing. So it was cool to see him chopping it up in the elbow range. And like, unfortunately for Smith, like he took the brunt of that and he had no answer for it. And by the time the fight was over, it looked like he got attacked by a tiger. He was cut up. The gash on his head here looked horrible. He had one over his eye. His nose was busted. It just looked horrible. He posted a video the next day. His head's all wrapped up. It was a savage beatdown. And I know Jacob Smith is definitely disappointed with himself. He's upset. But I mean, talk about like the guts it takes to go into your first 1FC Muay Thai fight against Rodtang. I know nobody wants like a moral victory when they're fighters, but he made it the distance, basically being Rodtang's punching bag. So if there's a silver lining there, might as well take it. But that wraps up the quarterfinals of the Muay Thai Grand Prix. So I'm really excited for these next matchups because we have Rodtang versus Savvas Michael and Superlek versus Goncalves. So when that card approaches, I'll do another video breaking down those fights. But I think those are fantastic matchups. I mean, like I said in the other video, it's hard for me to see anybody beating Rodtang. But I think we're going to have absolute fireworks with the Superlek and Goncalves. And we'll go over that another time. And we'll get into the X's and O's and the what ifs and have a lot of fun with that. One honorable mention I wanted to make is Joseph Lasiri. Biggest upset ever against Prajanchai, making him quit on the stool. What a performance. Huge kudos to him. And like, talk about confidence. He came out, he said he was going to do it. And he just went out there and did it. And I think an interesting note, and you definitely see it in that fight, and we almost saw it in the main event as well with Pet Morachat, is I think people who fight Muay Thai that are not from Thailand are starting to, maybe not starting to, but I'm just seeing it more, learning how to expose kind of some of the habits of the Thai fighters, because a lot of them start slow. And I mean, Joseph Lasiri just did it, like put out a textbook performance of how to capitalize on that, right? So he had, I believe, Prajanchai quit on the stool after round 3, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, and then you saw it in the main event with Vino putting it on Pet Moratak really early. Ultimately, though, Pet Moratak came back to win it in the end, but barely. Split decision. Like, it could have gone the other way. If it wasn't for the knockdown in round 4, Pet Moratak loses, without a doubt. So people are picking up on that. When you're matched up against a Thai, come out guns blazing, you know? Put them on the back foot, put the volume on them. Take that first rounds one. If it's a 3-round fight, you take round 1 and 2, you've won, right? All you have to do is basically survive round 3, get knocked down, make it a 10-8, and make it a draw. But in a 5-round fight, they start especially slow, and then they go into round 4. Perhaps they're down 3 rounds, and now there's a sense of urgency. So, yeah, if I was a Thai coach, I would be taking note of this trend and trying to change that. I think Rodtang is one of the few that doesn't do it, and he has done it in the past. That's why the first Haggerty-Rodtang fight was so close, because he started slow and Haggerty didn't. And it's the same way that Haggerty beat Sam Agayangadaw. He just came out and put it on him. I think he won rounds 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 were a bit closer, but like he had already dismantled him by that point. So, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting note to make about some of the Thai fighters and their style. And then the broadcast even mentioned that some of them, they also kind of take, and they mentioned this in the Pet Morakat fight, is because he was skirting around the outside in the 5th round, is they tend to do that as well sometimes if they think they're up. So there's a lot of room to take advantage of the Thai way of kind of sitting back. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's hard for them to change because they've been doing it for so long, and I think that comes from the way how the fights are scheduled and how they run in Thailand. I'm going to try and learn more about that now that I've noticed this kind of this trend. So I'm going to dig into that and see where that comes from, and I'll eventually report what I learn. But in the short term, if I was a Muay Thai fighter and I'm getting matched up with these Thai guys, I know that I'm just going to come out like a, I don't know, basically like a crazy person and try and take away the first couple rounds from them before they're even awake, you know? Other than that, great fights. Can't wait for the next round. And let me know what you thought. What did you think of the Rodtang performance? Did you see what I saw? Did you think he was even more lethal? Or am I biased just because I'm such a big Rodtang fan? What did you think of the other ones? Superlek, Chris Naito, Savvas Michael, Naziri. Do you agree with the fighters as well, all picking Superlek as a favorite? I think they're crazy. I think Superlek's good. I think Superlek Rodtang will be the final. I think that will be an insane fight. I don't see him beating Rodtang. And what did you think, of course, of our honorable mention, Joseph Lasiri, making a huge upset against Prajanchai, making him quit on the stool and taking his belt? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Appreciate all that. And I'll be back later in the week with another video. Until then, take care.